Welcome to What Dogs Have Taught Me. I'm your host, Julie Hart, and this is the podcast where we stop to wonder if we are truly grasping the lessons our canine companions could teach us. I'm a dog rehabilitator, here with something you may not know. The greatest teachers about dogs aren't necessarily human, they're actually the dogs themselves. At What Dogs Have Taught Me, we dive deep into the educational, practical, and sometimes controversial aspects of understanding our canine companions. Whether you're a seasoned dog trainer, devoted rescuer, loving foster parent, or simply someone who shares their life with the dog, this podcast is for you. So whether you're looking to deepen your understanding of dog behavior, refine your training techniques, or simply revel in the magic of all things dog, you're in the right place. Let's have a heart-to-heart. If you've ever wanted to be a fly on the wall and listen in while two very seasoned pit bull aficionados and all-around dog handlers talk about dogs and the American Pit Bull Terrier in general, you are in luck, because that's what my podcast is about today. Today, I have none other than legendary Diane Jessup and also my mentor, Phyllis Mooland, with me, who has rescued and trained pit bulls since about 1986. Here's a little background about Diane Jessup, taken from her book, The Working Pit Bull, and her website that lists her Cairn Terriers and Dobermans she meticulously breeds, darbarranch.com. Diane has worked for 20 years in animal control, which itself is an amazing accomplishment. But she also was the director of the Canine Aggression Outreach Center, where she did consulting services for animal control and public services on canine-human interaction. Diane and her pit bulldogs traveled to give seminars on dog behavior and for law enforcement. Diane competed extensively with her pit bulls, and her banddog Dread has the record for holding the most titles in the most sports of any dog of any breed. Diane competed in shutzhund, weight pull, tracking, obedience, conformation, guard work, and herding with Dread and her other pit bull dogs. This is all while using positive marking methods for training her dogs. Diane has written 3 books: The Working Pit Bull, Colbys Book of the American Pit Bull Terrier, and The Dog Who Spoke with Gods. Her dogs have been in 5 films and many other media, and she has been featured in many TV shows, including Oprah and CNN. She is currently retired from official work, but breeds and cares for Dobermans and Cairn Terriers. We are so honored she is joining us today to share her love and knowledge of pit bulls and other things dog. Diane, this is Phyllis.
Hi, Phyllis.
Hi, Diane.
Phyllis is my mentor. I hired her, 15 years ago to train my dogs.
Okay.
And then I just kind of started following her around like a little puppy. And
I have a person like that too that I follow.
But now, I've worked for her since, and we're friends, and we do things like this together. So,
well, thank you from the community, pit bull community, and the dog training community. Thank you.
Yeah.
The more education, the better.
Yeah, for sure. And so it was Phyllis's idea to interview you because we saw, what was it, Phyllis? It was an answer you put up about gameness.
I actually didn't answer it because I started answering it and I got so mad. Stopped answering it, and then you answer it, and I was like, yes. I was like, we need to call this lady and see if we can get her on a podcast.
And I'm sure it was a snarky answer too, knowing me. I'm such a jerk on Facebook. And I'm really such a nice person, but Facebook just brings it out in me.
It was a correct answer, and it was people were not understanding the difference between gameness and drives.
And reactivity.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, okay, good.
So do you have pit bulls?
I do.
Oh, cool.
I have one. I had.
Have you had them for a while?
I started in 1984, 1985.
There you go.
Bulls.
Okay.
They were what I like to say. They were real pit bulls.
Yeah, exactly. That's where I was kind of going.
Yeah.
I was seeing if you'd gotten into the era where they were for real.
They were real, and my goal was to be able to have them when I was present, be able to together. I did not have them together when I was not present.
Yeah.
Had very few negative incidents, and I didn't use very much equipment. I don't like a lot of on dogs. It's a relationship, and
Yep.
had to be a reason or there wasn't an issue. And I had a couple fairly serious dogs, but I made that happen 3 times with 3 separate packs.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's how I got started. So I kind of got started doing some level of rescue. In 1985, I stole a dog off of somebody's porch. They had her tied up on a 3-foot chain to the door.
Oh, Lord.
Ready to deliver. And I was probably about 15 there. And I got caught.
That's the age when you really get stuff done, you know?
I got busted, and I had to give the dog back. And I just started taking dogs in. And I would get really frustrated because I never put pit bulls in multiple dog households. You had to be an only dog household. You had to go through my training. You had to go through training before I gave you the dog.
Right.
Didn't just give somebody a dog and then see how it went. They had to follow my protocol. And if they didn't get the dog at the end of the day. And I think one family in 4 decades have I put multiple dogs in the same house, but then they're pit bulls. They're not what I mean. I have a big problem with 2 things: umbrella term and blue.
We are sisters.
This is what I learned last night. I texted Flip and I'm like, you guys are going to get along great.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I kind of want to get it out there to people that, what is a pit bull and what is their history, and we're mislabeling these dogs, and dogs that are harming people are being called pit bulls, and there's no pit bull in the DNA. Because I've done. And anyway.
Well, luckily now we have Connie Corsos coming up on the outside, to be the new bad boy breed. Because the study of the fad breeds is something that I've always been really interested in, and Bronwyn Dickey did the best book on that, and she came and stayed at my house for almost a week looking through my stuff on this idea of about every 10 to 12 years there was a new fad breed that was the bad boy. I call them fad panic dogs, like Dobermans and then Rottweilers or whatever. And I think it was so unfortunate for the pit bull that it came along right when the internet came along, and so it went worldwide, and it lasted forever because it would die down and then it would start up in some new country, and then it was just such a mess with the media and all that. Because, some of us here are old enough to remember when the Doberman was the thing. And for back then, and for the lack of media we had, it was huge. Yep. I mean, there's people today that, because I have Dobermans, and people today come up, and say like, oh, I had those back in the 70s, and we had to take them to the vet and have their skulls split so their brains wouldn't swell, And, I still hear that today. It's like, are you kidding me?
That was a real thing?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was that their heads were narrow. And so the reason Dobermans turned on their owners was because their brain swelled. And to this day, my friends that are my age, when they come over to visit me and stuff, and the Dobermans are being idiots, they're like, oh, Lord, their brain swelling.
The craziest stuff,
Yeah. So they had the myths. They had all the same things that we had with the pit bull. The only difference was that, the pit bulls, quite honestly, are a much more capable dog than the Doberman, and that's why when they grab somebody, it's more serious.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see a lot of, well, and I mentioned this last night, but I see a lot of comments in the trainer pages that, this pit bull did this pit bull did that. And one of them I actually said, because I've learned a lot from Phyllis. I wasn't really into pit bulls until I met her, and I met some, and then I moved out to New Mexico and I met more, and I was like, oh, now I get it, right? Now I get why people like this breed. Um, but they're saying a pit bull, attacked their owner, and a pit bull did this. And I'm like, well, but that's probably not even a pit bull.
Mm-hmm.
And I happen to comment that the color can affect the temperament, which I think is one of the questions in here. But and turns out the guy posted a picture of the dog and it was blue.
Yeah.
And big.
Yeah. And big. Yeah.
So, so yeah, maybe we should start with, defining when we say pit bull during the podcast, like what are we referring to? Diane, what do you refer to when you say the term pit bull?
Well, I'm kind of a purist, and so I do believe there is a breed called pit bull. I remember sitting in on a hearing in Washington State when they were considering a breed ban, and I was sitting next to the vice president of the AKC, and he got up and said, "There's no such thing as as a breed as a pit bull," and I was like, "Oh, sit down," There is a breed, where the shortened term is pit bull, because actually the other two words, the American and terrier, are nonsense that the UKC came up with. But it is an old breed. It's been around in one form or another. Gripping dogs that helped people by gripping other animals, have been around for a trillion years. And they were, as far as the actual pit bull breed, when I was working with Lou Colby on his book, he was showing me pedigrees that went back to like the 1700s. These people didn't play. I mean, they were breeding dogs for very specific purposes, and while paper pedigrees were not as big a thing, you better believe they knew their dog's breeding. That's kind of a thing of mine when people are like, "Oh, people in the old days, they just bred whatever. They didn't care." It's like, are you kidding me? Like, animals were a big deal in people's lives back then. And look at the Arabs. They didn't, they produced the Arab horse and the Saluki. They didn't do that by just breeding whatever happened to wander through the village. Okay, so it's very wrong to think that our ancestors were not extremely careful in their breeding in most circumstances. So when I say pit bull, I basically am talking about a 30 to 60 pound dog that can trace its roots back definitely to the early 1800s, even in pedigree forms, and is a dog that, I guess, being a purist, I look at it as dogs that were purpose bred. So I think of them as game dogs, because when we came into this picture in the early 80s or whatever, there were still a lot of game dogs around, and the temperament on game dogs was significantly different than, like, let's say, American Staffordshire Terriers. I remember telling people, they would call me up and say, hey, because I did shutzhund, they would be like, "Oh, I want a pit bull for protection," and I would always say to them, "Get an Amstaff." Because if you get yourself a little game bred pit bull, it's going to sit there and wag its tail and hit somebody beating the crap out of you, and just be like, "Hi." They're not human aggressive dog, or they were not human aggressive dogs.
Yeah,
I don't know if that answers the question.
It does.
Okay.
yeah,
I'm sorry.
that kind of brings us to this. I have the questions here, but this is always a loose,
Yeah, especially with me. Oh,
you know,
yeah.
I mean, because I don't want to limit conversation that's valuable either, even though it's not in the questions, right? So, or if it's like out of order, we don't, I just kind of go
Okay.
with the flow.
Well, just herd me where you need me to go,
Okay.
because I get off on tangents. You know how you saw that last night. Oh Lord.
Yeah, and I was asking Phyllis, like, I don't think I've ever seen a game bred pit bull. Um, I've seen American Pit Bull Terriers.
No, no, no. Being in New Mexico, you may have. I'll tell you.
I might have. The ones I find that are pit bulls are not I wouldn't consider them game bred. And I don't know, maybe that's why they're in the shelters. They didn't.
Are you saying that because they're not dog aggressive?
That gameness and aggression are two different things.
Yeah, but they also don't have, well, I don't know. I should ask Phyllis. I mean, I had a pit bull mix. Her name was Chardonnay. I don't know where you would place her on that spectrum.
I mean, she was mixed, but she had a lot of pit bull in her.
Yeah.
I mean, if they're kind of small and kind of friendly and wimpy, that's game bred to me. I mean,
you worked,
you know,
that place you worked at for a while when you first moved out there, that lady had.
Yes, that's true.
She was trying to do some level of. I mean, I turned it off as soon as I saw her trying to do bite work with those dogs, but but they were nice.
Yeah. That was one of the big misunderstandings, people who didn't know me real well. My first pit bull, Dread, to be honest with you, was a little bit of a van biter. I mean, he was a lot more defensive. A true good game bred pit bull, I found later, is not defensive. They don't guard the car. They don't guard the house. Dread was a lot of things, including my soulmate, but I'm also not one to make excuses for my dogs or, anything. And he was dead serious. When we first started training him to do shutzhund, he was dead serious. He said, "Oh, you want this guy dead? Okay, Mom, I'll do that." And it took us quite a while to train him and teach him that it was a game. And we were playing a rough game with the sleeve. And he became an extremely clean dog. In fact, he went on and starred in didn't star, but he went on to be in several movies where he worked with big name actors because he was so predictable and clean. And I just want everyone to know that when I did shutzhund with my pit bulls, it was never attack work. Okay. It was always a rough game. I trained them actually on myself. It was just like, Mom's got a burlap thing on her arm. Let's play. So I don't think true pit bulls a lot of times really don't want to do bite work. They're just super friendly and submissive. And that's how they should be. They're too much dog to be human aggressive in my mind.
Thank you. I keep throwing this out like every time I hear you talk. I'm like,
no, I know. I mean, this whole thing where everybody's crossing them with mastiffs and whatnots, and every video you see they're doing bite work, and I'm just like, whatever.
Out, Julie, but the fall of the American Pit Bull was the breeding of the American Bully. It destroyed it. It caused so many problems. I was there watching that all happen. I saw the dog that created that. The dog was human aggressive, had bad nerves, bad skin, and was blue. That was the first dog. And a UKC actually fought it for years. And then they caved in and accepted them as a breed. All these dogs that are seriously hurting humans that are being called pit bulls are not. They're American bullies. And I've done a lot of tests on those dogs, and there's some of them, no pit bull in there at all. There's Amstaff. There's called some Mastiff. There's, things like
French
that.
Bulldog. English Bulldog. Yeah.
Little ones, my God, they can't even walk.
Yeah, and that's so sad.
A health mess, and the outlaw that breeding here.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. I can't believe anybody says they love a dog and they would produce something that deformed. It's just not, that's not love.
Hey, you can get a lilac colored one with long hair now for 35 grand.
Oh, well, yeah.
I call them gargoyles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they
I
look
mean,
like
yeah, they're, you
gargoyles.
know, when they're not too extreme, I mean, they are cute. You know, they got that cute little face or whatever. But, you know, as I had mentioned, I have a lot of orthopedic issues and a lot of pain from my orthopedic issues, and so I just feel for dogs that are bred to have orthopedic issues. It's just horrible.
Yep.
But don't you find it kind of interesting though that American bullies have like two distinct personalities? There's the XL bullies, which are you know, crossed more with the mastiffs and stuff, and they're wiping out people right and left, like over in England. You know, I mean, good Lord, you know. And then there's the kind of more the Amstaff English bull, French bull mixes that are absolutely insipid, you know, and I mean they're just so mellow and calm, and I kind of find it, you know, in a way, in one tiny way, I'm kind of glad that happened, because all the punks that wanted a pit bull now want, you know, they don't have real pit bulls. They've got these little insipid little American bullies that aren't going to hurt anybody, you know. And so in one way, I'm kind of selfishly for the pit bull glad that happened. But the bigger dogs that everybody is getting and crossing and training to bite, you know, that's really fallen hard on the pit bull.
It really has. And people don't know the difference. They think it's the same dog, and it's not even close. Not even close.
No. And you know what cracked me up is when England, I mean, I love England. I've been there twice. I just love England. I love everything about it, but they are such dorks when it comes to like their dog laws. And, you know, when they banned the pit bull and then they banned the Tosa, and there wasn't even a Tosa in the country. Okay. But by God, they banned them, you know. And so, and then they didn't ban Staffy bulls, which was funny because they're one of the most popular breeds, but hey, they were occasionally wiping out people. But then when the American bully thing, you know, came, they were so, you know, here they were banning and killing dogs that were even part pit bull, right? But American bullies came along and they were like, oh, that's not a pit bull. And I was just like, okay, by your thinking, you know, this should be a pit bull. And now, of course, they have, you know, this huge problem over there with these, you know, I just call them mastiff mixes because that's what they are.
Yep.
Yeah, it's funny here because I've tested a lot of dogs that I've fostered or have gone through the rescue like DNA tests, and usually there's 3 dogs that are in almost all of them, which is pit bull, Chihuahua, and husky.
No kidding.
Yeah, and so, you know, but usually there's about 10 to 15 breeds that come up in the DNA test.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, I'm just wondering if like all that mixture dilutes all the traits so it becomes just your, you know, back to like your basic brown dog.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I do have strong feelings about breed DNA. I'm a big DNA person for health, you know, health things with the dogs. I have never been a big fan of how they set up originally the breed identification. Because I can tell you early on it was horrible.
Right.
I remember Animal Farm Foundation decided they wanted me to test several of my pit bulls, and I threw my Patterdale Terrier in for good measure. It was a 15-pound little terrier, and she came back as like Great Pyrenees and, you know, something. And my pit bulls, and they were all siblings. They came back as like, you know, English setter and, you know, all different things. And so I've studied that quite a bit because that's an area of interest for me is historically how purebreds, how long certain breeds have been purebreds. And I don't hold a lot of faith in the DNA things. Did you guys happen to see that Canadian program where they looked into the DNA of dogs testing and they sent in the DNA of that reporter?
Yeah.
And he came back as like Rottweiler, and I mean, that was classic to me, know.
I always tell people I take it with a grain of salt. I do it kind of for entertainment, maybe some information.
Yeah. And it might be more accurate than I think, but I think what your point is that yes, a trait like gameness in a pit bull is extremely hard to keep. Any extreme trait in any purebred is very hard to keep, and you can lose it in just a few generations. One of my favorite quotes is from a very famous sled dog racer who races the Iditarod and has won a bunch of times. He literally says he breeds 300 puppies a year to get 2. Okay, because it's not that the breed doesn't have, you've got people like Janice Bradley saying, oh, there's no such thing as breed traits, it's and it's not that, it's just that at the level of drive that he needs an extreme level of drive, and that is really difficult to keep in a breeding program. So with the pit bull, if you're breeding for just pet, or you're mixing in things, you are going to end up with a generic dog. Having said that, the worst thing anyone can do is to breed a purebred pit bull with a reactive breed like the Malinois, like Huskies. In my opinion, Huskies are more of a prey driven breed, but Border Collies, Malinois, Shepherds, Rottweilers, anything like that, that is a big mistake, because you're taking a mind of a dog that is very capable and is not reactive at its best, and then you're breeding it with a sheepdog whose idea of life is nip 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 nip. That is not a good combo. So when I see this new thing where they're breeding what they call what do they call them? Bull herder? Yeah, bull herders. Oh, that just makes me crazy. It's like, either, get a pit bull and do stuff with it. Annetta Cheek, myself, Marilyn Brubaker, Larry Hansen, we've all proven you can do whatever you want to do with a real pit bull, okay? Mm-hmm. Or get a Malinois, but don't mix them. Yeah. It's ridiculous.
Watch Annetta Cheek underneath the bridge in Alexandria, and she was working with a guy named Gary Lyons, who was, I don't know, head of Canine Police Department, maybe down there. And man, that dog was impressive.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Baroness was probably the second hardest hitting pit bull, as far as talking about like the bite work, that I'd ever seen. The only one I ever saw that was harder was her daughter, Whole Lot of Rosie, that Larry Hansen had. And that dog, back in my younger days, that dog, she came and she hit me so hard my glasses ended up in an apple tree. Those were some amazing work dogs that Larry Hansen and Annetta put together. And I had some, and I just loved them to death.
That dog was something else.
Yeah. She was an icon in the breed.
Yeah. I mean, wow. When she would hit so hard, it would echo under the bridge.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you something you may not know. When she went to the Schutzhund Nationals with Holly Rose, on the first part of the bite work, the attack out of the escape, she double fanged herself, where their teeth go through their lips. And she performed the entire rest of that procedure, biting through her own lips with her teeth, including the courage test. And you can see her between exercises, she was trying to paw the lip off the teeth, But other than that, you would never even know, that was a gritty dog.
Yeah.
So would that be gameness?
Where
a dog will keep going with that kind of injury?
Yeah. I mean, to me, that's a form of gameness, because you see in Dobermans and Shepherds and things like that, the sheepdogs, there's more of a tendency to not like, especially with Dobermans, they don't want to get hurt, you know. And yeah, you know, you see shepherds, you step on their toe while you're doing the bite work, and they're like, "Oh, I'm going home to mom," you know. So yeah, I think pit bulls bring that toughness, physical toughness. They like the physicality of the bite work. As far as biting, like on humans, there's no measure of gameness there, you know, short of getting in a real fight and somebody stabbing them and they don't quit, you know, or something like that. But reactivity and human aggression has zero to do with true game. The gameness is being cool in your mind in when you're under duress, really.
Well said. Yep.
I mean, you know, when I went from having Dread, and then I went from having Anetta's dogs to and the hemp Sorona kennel dogs. And when I got into the Sorrel dogs, these were truly deeply game bred dogs, and you know, they came right off Bert Sorrell's yard. And I'll be honest with you, as long as I'd been in the breed, which at that point was, you know, over 10 years, 12 years, I was like, oh, you know, and that was Joni Winchester, who was Bert Sorrell's, she's Bert Sorrell's ex-wife. We're extremely good friends. We talk all the time now. And she came up with an expression for me that has been really important to me when I'm trying to explain things like this to people. And that is, you only know what you know. So when I had Dread, you know, and I was like, oh, you know, he's a game dog, you know, blah, 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 you know, because I didn't know. I only knew what I had seen up to that point. When I saw the Sorrel dogs, I was like, oh, okay, this is what gameness is. And what it is that when they would get into a fight, it was so calm and so flurried that I would have to sit and look twice and see if they were playing or they were trying to kill each other, because it was just this calm grab, flip on the back, don't care if they're on their back. There was none of the freneticness that you see in a typical dog fight. And it's that cool-headed, unworried calmness to me that makes a game dog. And without diving too deep into the whole thing of when pit bulls started going to crap, was closely associated when Bobby Hall and these guys, they came up with these black dogs like Bully Sun and Zebo, and there was this whole line of pit bulls that were man biters. And what they were is they were extremely hard-mouthed. They had hard bites. They were very reactive, very aggressive, and they would basically destroy another dog, because the old game dog would just be like, okay, I'm going to grab a hold of you. I'm going to wrestle you down, you know, good old Southern boys, you know. And these reactive, hard-biting black Zebo and Bordeaux dogs, you know, they came in and were very reactive and man-biting. And I'll be honest with you, that's where I'm laying the blame. When you get the occasional man-aggressive, true game-bred pit bull, is tracing back to those very highly influential sires that were man-biters and screwed up the lines.
I had a Zebo dog, the only puppy I gave back, because she was grabbing me.
Mm-hmm.
Say this, I never had pit bull puppies back in the day that would grab me. They just weren't put their teeth on people.
Yeah.
And this was grabbing me and grabbing the dogs, very, very young age.
Yeah.
And now I got to see if I have that pedigree somewhere so I can share that with you. Because
yeah. No, it's, you know,
a little bit.
Yeah, well, and yeah. And it's a problem, you know. There was so much controversy. I don't know if you ever heard any of all this. When Pat Patrick got busted, you know, Pat Patrick was a very, very famous breeder of fighting dogs down in Arizona. And he got busted. And for some reason, Joni Winchester and I it became a rumor that we had done this or somehow, which neither of us like knew him or anything about him, But the HSUS was smarting after the Vic thing because, the idiot Purcell, he had come out saying the Vic dogs were the most dangerous dogs in America, and all this crap. And he ended up looking like a fool. And so they decided they needed to do something. So they called old Diane up and said, would you come down here and look at these 200 some dogs we got and try to put some into your law dogs program? And which I was doing at that time, which was taking rescued pit bulls and putting them in the state patrol for detection work. So I flew down there and looked at these dogs, and it was so sad because in his case, these were true game dogs, and they were so shy. Shyness is very hereditary, and he had gotten some shyness genes in there somewhere along the line, and these dogs were practically catatonic. They were so shy. I'm sure they would do well in a pit, but they were worthless. But having said that, where I'm going with this is the only 2 dogs I took. I said, well, let me take some puppies and I'll see what I can do with them. But by the time the court case worked its way through and Pat signed them all over to have them killed, the puppies had gotten to be about 5 months old, being grown up in the shelter. And I was really surprised because when I brought them home, the first thing they did was they saw another dog and they just turned around and they just climbed right up me and were eating me alive. And I had never, ever had that experience with a pit bull where they would redirect onto a human. That's the number one thing about a good pit bull is they do not redirect. And yeah, I was very surprised because they were game bred dogs. But once you get that reactivity and those bad traits in there, and then you inbreed, it's going to be stuck in there. I have no problem with inbreeding, but I have a problem with inbreeding bad traits.
Yeah, one bad trait just makes it messes the whole thing up.
Yeah, that reactivity. Can you think about it? You can't have that in the pit. You got 3 people in there, and the dogs have to stay level-headed. That to me, that level-headedness is to me is the number one trait I love about the pit bull.
A few dog fights I had in the very beginning, I learned not to have them. One, I actually ran in the house for 2 seconds to answer the door. And a 6-month-old puppy had a hold of one of my dogs. She was just standing there looking at me like, can you get this off me, please?
Yeah.
He used a stick, and I got her off of her, and there was a hole clean through her leg. Took her to the vet, had her sewed up, and went, well, now I know that you don't leave a 6-month-old puppy out with an adult dog because the same thing can happen. But,
yeah. It's a tricky thing. I don't ever encourage anyone to do it, the hard way. I don't know if you know that or not, but, she learned that even after 5 years of having dogs live together, things happen. And I was always just, I just managed my male. I could have a lot of my females together, but I would never leave them together, when I wasn't there. But the males were like, yeah, that wasn't happening.
All males, 1 female. Second pack, all females.
Wow. You must be a much more dominant personality than me because my dogs just like I have Cairn Terriers now and they just walk all over me, man. They don't
do it now. Now I have 1 pit bull and I have a lot of mixed breeds, all mixed with some level of something.
Yeah.
Phyllis can be very scary when she.
Oh, you always say that, but I was very calm with my dogs. The first was a military guy, so it was a lot of screaming and yelling commands and yelling at these dogs, and I didn't do that. And I was really calm, and I knew to separate them when I couldn't watch them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but intense is quiet.
100%. Silence is deadly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Reactivity is fear, defense, and I don't know the difference between defense and forward nowadays. I feel like I saw actually Annetta send somebody off the field. This girl came on the field with a young puppy. I want to say it was a Malinois or a young shepherd, and the dog was super spooky and and just mouthing on her like crazy. And she said, nope, not here.
Yeah.
She said, this is not right. You need to go train that dog and come back in a year, or something to that effect. She was like, I don't accept this on the field here. This is not right. Dog you train for this kind of work. The dog's got bad nerves.
Yeah.
And back then it seemed like it was more rare. Now I feel like it's the opposite. I say it often. We are lucky if we have 10% of the canine population that is still stable.
Yeah, it is, I mean, dog bite sports go through fads just like everything else, and right now, I think because of the demographics of who's involved, there's been a switch away from it being Schutzhund was originally a breeding test for breeding dogs to make sure they had all the sufficient drives. And, that's why when people say, well, Schutzhund's not realistic, and it's like, that's fine. It isn't attack training, it's testing. It's testing drives, and that's all you're doing, and it has to be, formalized. And now everybody just wants the dog to be as reactive and hard-hitting and, man aggressive as possible on all the breeds, especially like the poor Malinois. And, they think it's so cute, but they forget that the dogs weren't always like that. Malinois and back in the day they were intense, but they had brains, and they were quite thoughtful dogs and intelligent dogs, and they were just breeding that intelligence out to have them just be crazy, and
no.
Crazy's fun when you're like 20, but when you get a little older, it's like, okay, not so much, Yeah.
Well, so talk about like gameness, aggression, reactivity, drive, because I think no matter what kind of dog you're training, whether it's, a Malinois or purebred for sport or going to the shelter and picking one for adoption, I think those are really important things to understand.
Yeah, I guess I'll go first. What I like to get across to people, anybody interested in bite work, I always give them my little lecture on the 3 drives, and everybody's got an opinion on aggression drives and all that, but this is my little talk, and that is, to me, there's basically like 3 kinds of drives that dogs bite out of. The first one is prey, and praise to me is the most interesting drive because it's the least aggressive drive. And what I do is I tell people, I said, when you're talking about defense and prey, which are 2 very different things, I want you to think about a lion in Africa. Okay. A lion in Africa, when it wants to kill something, when it wants to kill a giant gnu or a zebra or whatever, it slicks back its hair, it sinks down in the grass, it doesn't roar, it doesn't show its teeth, it's quiet, it's intense, and it sneaks up on it, grabs it, and kills it with absolutely zero threat display, okay? When a lion sees another lion come onto its territory, it wants to repel that lion. And the difference between prey and defense is prey is grab and hold. Defense is repel the threat. So you're going to see threat display, teeth, loud, roaring, blah, 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 blah. And the third one, I say dominance. And dominance really is defense, because defense means you're defensive, and dominance means you're defensive also. You're a little worried about where you stand in the pack, and you're going to do something about it. So those 2 are very closely related. Though there are some dogs, I'm thinking of a male Rottweiler right now, that when they go into dominance aggression, they're not particularly scared. Okay, they have a more mindset of, I just need to dominate this. But the thing to me about pit bulls is that this is a breed that should never be trained in defense, because they're not a defensive breed. They don't go around looking to repel things. They go around looking to grab and hold. And a good pit bull doesn't have, they don't guard their house particularly well. They don't guard their cars particularly well. They like people, and that's how they need to be. When people go into a shelter and they're thinking about picking a dog out to rehab, which, oh God, okay, I don't like the word rehab. They're not on drugs. When they decide to pick a dog out, to me, the number one important thing is to stress that dog and see what its reaction is. Okay. And I know, and God love her, Sue Sternberg. This was, I think, one of the things. I didn't know a lot about her, but I do think she kind of felt this way too. And it's so unpopular because everybody's like, the little baby is stressed in the shelter. I'm like, yes, and the little baby's going to be stressed at the home with the 3-year-old screaming and kicking it and doing all this, you know. And I say to people, you know, when you go to the Marine Corps, there's a reason that the minute you step off the bus, they start yelling at you. They're yelling at you. They're stressing you. They are throwing all this crap at you, because right from the get-go, they're seeing, how do you react to stress, and are you going to make it or not? And this is exactly what we should be doing to our dogs. Okay. When you go to the shelter and you want to pick a dog out that you're going to give to some Joe Public, okay, I don't want you picking out these cravenly, cowardly, shy, cringy dogs. I don't care what their backstory is. I can guarantee you there's a dog in that shelter that has a worse backstory and is standing at the gate wagging its tail. Okay. Those are the dogs that should be pulled. And I just feel like to say that you shouldn't go in and stress a dog a little bit and see what its reaction is foolish, because, like I said, the dog is going to be stressed at some point in its life out in the public. And I think that as a rescuer, it's your duty to look at that and assess it, and not leave it up to the family to assess what this dog's going to do when it's stressed. What do you think?
I agree with you 100%. I was ridiculed for years. I was actually called the pit bull murderer for years because I would not take certain dogs out of the shelter. If they were so skittish of humans, that was a big no for me. If they were environmentally had some things, maybe I would think about it. And just any kind of reactive towards dogs, right? Where they were out the gate just trying to go after dogs through the kennel and that kind of thing. So I agree 100%. The worst abuse case I ever took in was the best dog I ever had. Sorry. She passed her TT. I took her into nursing homes. I took her in to visit children. I had to deal with about 6 months of her wanting to go after other dogs in my house. And she had supervised, for a long period of time in the beginning when I brought her in. But she was great. That dog had her ears sheared off. She only had holes in her head. The ears were there with the shears when we pulled her out of there. It had when I put her on the vet table, she had pus coming out of one of those ears, and she just stood there wagging her tail and licking the chin of the vet while she was trying to clean out her ears. I mean, this is a real pit bull.
Yeah.
She was a great dog. And so
don't you love the fact that the people in the Humane Society they say, oh, it's all how you raise them, okay? And then they go on a dog fight bust, and they've got 200 dogs chained out in the woods that have never been socialized or petted, and the dogs are all like friendly and wagging their tails, and I'm like, yeah, there you go, it's all how you raise them, yeah.
Genetics.
Yeah. I mean, the dogs can be I always say, we used to have court case dogs, just mixed breed dogs that were born in the shelter I worked at, and they would grow up their whole first like 8 months in the stupid shelter. Horrible, not getting socialized, not getting anything. And they would be the nicest dogs, just no problem. And then you have people that have these show dogs and they raise them absolutely with every benefit, and they're like horrible little dogs, So yeah, I'm a big genetics person myself.
100%. I can't stand watching dog shows in the AKC. All those dogs, they're all tucked.
Yeah, yeah.
They're somebody's. And it's not what it used to be. I had an old friend that was into golden retrievers, and she'd been in retrievers for over 70 years, I think. Long time. Since she was a kid, she started showing dogs, I think, at age 10 or something. Her dogs, she had clean lines, she had no cancer. She had beautiful dogs, and she would say, if they can't pass a hunt test, they don't belong in the show ring.
Right.
They are not sound around humans. They should not be in the show. And she said that's the way it used to be. And she said, and then a lot changed, and all of a sudden it became about a beauty contest.
Yeah, it's all about the silhouette.
But it went to hell in a handbasket, as she would say. It's not. And dogs are not what they used to be.
I'll bring up a point too that I don't think it's just show dog people. It's dog people in general. They can't accept just normal. They can't accept the standard of okay, this is good enough. They always have to make everything extreme. And it's the same thing. Look at the sled dog people now. They don't want just huskies. Now they're breeding in bird dogs, and you got all these dogs up in Alaska that have about as much hair as a Chihuahua living out in the snow. And, I happen to think it's inappropriate to keep short-haired dogs. They can survive. My Dobermans live outside, and I'm in high desert. It gets down to -10. And they have, really appropriate dog houses, and they stay out, which is, the main thing is you can't have them come in and out because the hot house and back outside. But I just think it's, they want faster sprint dogs. So they're breeding in, these inappropriate breeds and making them live out in the snow and stuff. And the bite dog people, they're breeding crazier and crazier Malinois. And, so I don't think it's just show dog people. And then, it's the American bully people. They want it to have less and less legs till it's walking on its chest. And, people just like extremes. And I've never understood that. I don't know why someone wants a hairless cat. I don't know why someone wants anything that's not natural,
I think that has to do with ego and control.
Yes, it does.
It must be. Yeah, I think you're right. You're right.
And actually, Phyllis taught me how to evaluate dogs at the shelter. So I find it's very effective. And it took the rescue that I volunteer for from having lots of problem dogs, because they would just take dogs willy-nilly, sort of, to having dogs that we can adopt out to most homes.
What's your procedure? Oh,
that fluff ball.
Hey, baby.
Yeah.
I actually do think his DNA test was correct. He came back German Shepherd, Great Pyre, mostly.
Yeah, I can see that.
But
So what do you folks do when you test a dog?
Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Want to go, or you want me to do?
Depends on the dog and what I see that's in front of me first.
Well, yes.
And then everything I think it needs. But it's a lot of physical handling. They're stress induced. I usually clip everybody's nails. I put them under sound tests and touch tests and resource things. Like I don't want to see any what I like to call possessive aggression. People like to call it resource guarding. I'm like, well, I know that term until I was older. So if there's any towards the human over something, I'm out.
Let me ask you a question. Do you use your eyes?
Yeah.
With like just the hard stare, things like that. I use my eyes a lot And it's interesting how much you can get a dog to react. I do that in line at PetSmart. I'll be like standing in line in PetSmart, and somebody will have their like 10-month-old German Shepherd in front of me, turn around looking at me, and I'll be like, I'll just stand there and just go like, you know, and the dog like, so I just wondered if you do like facial expression, hard stare, things like that.
And see what kind of reaction I get. You know, we did at the shelter, Julie. The one where the girl was holding it, and it was across from me, and I kept telling everybody that dog's gonna hurt somebody.
Yeah.
You know, she was the only one that agreed with me. She said she's never wrong. I'm weird about testing dogs. I mean, if it were a lot of dogs that would not walk out of the shelters because they're gonna hurt. And you know, this training, and you know, when people use the term rehabilitation, I say, well, if you're a human and you go through rehabilitation, that means to me you can fall off the wagon. And so when the wagon, you're going to be in a lot of trouble because it's going to happen. And people in the general public are not dog pit trainers.
No.
People in the general public are relying on the rescues, the breeders, the shelters, the whoever for their expertise, that they're not going to come home with a dog that's going to harm their child.
Amen, sister.
I get a call every week on a dog that has come out of rescue, that has a pit bull label on it in a lot of cases, just because I'm known for the breed, and they're not. They're like 100 pounds and whatever. And they've harmed someone.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. You know, and if you step back, you know, I worked at a shelter for 20 years, and, you know, I understand. But, you know, first of all, when a parent goes to a backyard bred dog shop, okay, and picks up an adult dog with unknown behavioral history to take home to baby bunting, I got problems right there. You know, I mean, I'm sorry, I've got problems right there. And sure, you know, a lot of times it works out fine. But if I were a parent, you know, the last thing I would do is go get an adult dog, you know, with unknown background and unknown genetics and bring it home to the kids. So,
and I'm seeing a dog. They picked the dog on a website. Picked the dog. The dog was picked out of a shelter, was spayed at the shelter, and a week later transported across 2 straits. And while on a parking lot, you pay $600. You sign a contract. You just rescued a dog.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no that's a rescue walking away with $600 in their pocket for transport.
Yeah, it's retail rescue, you know.
I mean, and like you know nothing about these dogs, and you're having people sign contracts that you're not responsible. And when your dog went after your 2-year-old, they say, "Well, I'm sorry, we don't have any open foster homes. You just have to wait a month or so." Really?
Yeah. Which brings me to my absolute newest hysteria, which is veterinarians who will not behaviorally euthanize dogs for owners. And it is so bad now here. I live out in the country with old cow vets and stuff, and even they now are afraid to do behavioral euthanasia. And so they're, you know, and it's so bad because I know how hard that decision is for someone to make. And then they get static from the vet, you know. And I know there was a case, it wasn't here, it was in Russia, actually, though, where a dachshund, of all things, was very aggressive, and they took it to several vets trying to get it put down. And even in Russia, they were like, oh, no, we can't kill a healthy dog. And the dog ended up, you know, killing the kid. And so, yeah, I am so angry at the vets buying into this, you know, no-kill nightmare nonsense that you know, all dogs need to be alive and, you know, out doing damage. It's just ridiculous.
It's scary. What I was told by my vet here, a lot of the vets here are owned by big corporations and have to go by what they're told. Yeah, me referrals every now and then. But what she says to me is, under the corporation that she works for, she must send any behavioral case to an animal behaviorist. And you must try prescription drugs first.
Oh my God.
I had the last couple of cases I had that came out of there. One dog was on 9 medications, 9.
Oh.
Another one was a 6-month-old border collie that was told not to go outside, not to be taken out for walks, snuffle mats, and so on and so forth. That puppy was on 5 medications: trazodone, clonidine, Prozac, like you name it. They're just like layering these drugs on, and like not for nothing, they can't talk to somebody and tell them how they're feeling. Like,
right. And not to mention, when you drug dogs up, they lose inhibition.
Correct. Like
that's a real danger. We learned that doing euthanasias, because if something happened and the dog only got half a load on, you could take a dog that wouldn't bite anybody, but now they're out of their mind. Yeah. It's a real problem, and I don't know what I know the animal rights people are going to be like trying to pass laws and stuff to make it harder and harder and harder. And, it's a sensitive subject, and I won't go there, but I do believe in culling, your behavioral euthanasia, whatever you want to call it. And for me, I would much rather take one of my dogs that has known love and a full belly all its life, and have it dead in my arms, than throw it out into the world where it's going to sit in a crate full of urine in someone's garage as a rescue for months and months and years on end. So I just am very discouraged right now that the vets are doing this, hard timing people so bad. I take back as a breeder, I take back any dog. In fact, it's in a contract. They have to come back to me. And with the I don't get the Cairns back, but the Dobermans, everybody thinks they want a working dog, and then they get one and they're like, oh my God, I don't want this. And it's just amazing to me, the advice that they go to their vet and get this advice. That's, what does a vet know about
nothing.
Behavior? They know nothing. They don't know anything about nutrition. They don't know anything about breeding. Go to a crusty old breeder. I tell everybody, they know their stuff.
That's right. Like that lady, Golden's like, she really knew dogs.
Yeah,
could be. I mean, we have.
Did you ever know Sid Cross out in New York with Out of the Pits Rescue?
I know the name.
I did
a like short documentary thing with Sundance Film Festival, like in late 90s. I think they were also interviewed.
That, I got to just say a shout out to Sid. She's passed now, but she was the most amazing pit bull rescue person, because she was absolutely grounded, just so realistic, and they just didn't waver at all that if a dog was needed to be culled, it needed to be culled. And they had an amazing record of placing so many pit bulls, and not ever having incidences. They really knew what they were doing, and she was amazing.
I've never had a pit bull return to me in 4 decades for aggression. Period.
Well, that's a very good track record.
A dog returned for divorce. 1 time was pit bull.
Yeah.
You can't mess around.
No.
And they have enough problems than mostly guilty for. So, I mean, I'd like to teach people the difference, somehow. But
well, that's the thing, if you love a breed, you don't want it to be out there giving it a black eye,
Yeah. Yep. You said something that made me think of something, and now I'm like having a senior moment.
Oh, no rush.
Oh, Julie, I was gonna the off the chain video, was that out of the pits on there?
I never watched that video. I have an absolute aversion to punks owning these dogs.
Yeah.
And if it has anything to do with punks owning these dogs, I just can't do it. I know.
To my knowledge, that guy was videoing stuff without people knowing it and going into dog fights and then interviewing those people.
Yeah.
And then he interviewed us, and I want to say it was that girl. Yeah, about.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, she was a big deal on the East Coast.
Yeah, so I'm wondering now. I have to look back in there, and there were also 2 versions of that came out that really bothered me. So they had us watch all that, and some of it's terrible to watch. Some of the stuff he got on video.
Yeah.
Reality towards the dogs that were losing fights where I can't get it. Once you see something, you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
We had to watch all of that before we could say, yes, okay, we're okaying you to put us on film. Right?
Right.
So everybody that was there all had to come watch. Like 50% of the room got up and walked out.
Yeah.
I mean, it was awful. Right? So he was trying to show this is what's really happening to these dogs. Like, somebody's got to, this is terrible. Right?
Yeah.
And so I had a lot of people there that had adopted dogs from me. I think I had 60 people there. And so that's what that was all about. But I now I have to look back because I'm thinking it was her.
Yeah.
For only 2 people that he interviewed. So
I don't know. I have it on DVD, but I have no way to watch it.
The thing, we were talking about what is a pit bull and this and that, and I swear to God, I won't go off on this tangent too long, but I have every single underground, quote unquote, dogfighting magazine back to like 1921, and that's a lot of them, and dogfighting, and I'm not a dog fighter, and I never have fought a dog, but dogfighting prior to the 1970s was an entirely different thing than it is today. I mean, entirely. And unfortunately, I think it was an unintended consequence of the Humane Society's demonizing pit bulls and demonizing dog fighters to the point where the publications shut down, communications shut down, and the only information that was available to these young punks that decided, hey, look at these dogs, what they can do, was the misinformation from the Humane Societies. And that's where you get this ridiculous bait kitten and bait dog stories and things like that, and people say, oh, there really are bait dogs and all that. And it's like, there may be now a few, but believe me, prior to the 70s, when everything changed and they became felony laws, the people who were involved in dogfighting were, like family men, and they didn't want a felony. That's why they all got out when it became, felonies. And the only people left were the criminals, the drug addicts, the punks who didn't care if they went to jail. And they started doing all this stuff that they're hearing, like, oh, well, you got to have a bag full of kittens to train your fighting dog, which is like the most ridiculous, concept. I think it was, I'm not sure who said it, but I heard it from Joni Winchester. They said, that's like saying Muhammad Ali has to go punch kindergartners to learn how to, to practice his boxing. It's absolutely ridiculous. So I have a lot of resentment towards the Humane Societies creating this vacuum in dogfighting and cockfighting, where even though it was a brutal thing, there was self-governing, and it wasn't as bad as it is now become, because now it has nothing to do with gameness now. And I'll give you an example in cockfighting. Cockfighting, was about gameness, and these birds are amazing, and they would wear these little tiny pointed things on their heels, little spurs, and the fights lasted about 20, 30 minutes. And these birds are getting perforated the whole time this is going on. And it was, which bird could stand up to it and keep fighting. Well, nowadays that the humane societies have run out all the doctors and lawyers and regular people that were cockfighters, which, believe me, there were. Actually, some of the nicest people I've ever known were cockfighters. You've got these punks now, and what they do is they put 1 3-inch razor blade knife on one leg of the chicken, and they put them together, and the fight is over in usually 2 buckles, which is like the birds coming together twice, because they just slice their heads off or their legs off or whatever with these knives. Now, you tell me, what has that got to do with gameness? Nothing. You could put a knife on a Rhode Island red, and it's going to go out there and kill another bird. So I'm not sure I'm getting my point across, but I'm just very upset that
I'm looking at this.
Oh my Lord. Yeah.
So that's
do you remember Dale Dunning? He was down in Arizona. He was the head of the Humane Society down in Arizona. He was a real treasure.
This was some guy named John Goodwin.
Oh God, yes, I know John. Yeah, he was in HSUS.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just sad, that they put this misinformation out there, and now it is a self-fulfilling prophecy, and things are so much worse for the dogs. That stuff Vic was doing. I talked to Luke Colby about it, which, if anybody doesn't know, the Colby family is very famous in fighting pit bulls. He was just like, "Are you kidding me?" Yeah, there you go. He's like, "Are you kidding me? I mean, this would never happen. Nobody would have tolerated that crap. They would have beat the crap out of Vic, for treating dogs like that." And but that's today,
It's different. And
it is. Yeah.
So I got called in. So I had a friend of mine was on the head of Fairfax County Canine, and he says, "Oh, I got called into this thing we're supposed to go to about dog fighting, and like, you should go." I was the only civilian in the class. They had so many things asked backwards. They didn't know what they had. They had a pit bull gym T-shirt and thought that had something to do with dog fighting. Stuff in there, and I'm looking at all these. I mean, it's got all the. I mean, but they had some. They were so misinformed, and they were. Of course, they were going to go out and save the world after the Michael Vick dog case, and
yeah, and that was an absolute cluster too. I mean, to be honest with you, that was it had some good points and it had some really bad points. The good point was it did finally, I think it was a tipping point for people to realize the dogs are victims. Mm-hmm. But the bad point was it was a classic example of using these dogs for money. There were several dogs that were very, very shy, pathologically shy. And so, best friends in Utah, they're like, "Oh, well, give us $18,000 per dog and we'll stick them in a 10x10 the rest of their lives." And I just have no tolerance for that. They should have manned up and put the dogs down that couldn't live a good life, and and so that kind of started that whole like, oh, a dog can be a pathetic, basket case mentally, and we'll just keep it alive and use it for PR and all that. So anyway, don't get me going on it.
Get involved, and now sometimes I look back and say, well, maybe you should have gotten involved. But
I was involved from the beginning because I was actually one of the people named on the paperwork that the dogs could go to for the Law Dogs program.
Yeah.
And they sent me one. Oh, I'm telling you, this was funny. They sent me one dog bad rap picked it out, and they said, "Oh, this is gonna be a great detection dog because all it does is sniff." So they sent me like a 5-year-old stud dog who never lifted his head off the ground from sniffing piss. You know, that's all he did. And actually, he went on to be a great little dog. He went on to live with that guy who had that white pit bull Wallace that used to do the frisbee stuff.
Okay.
And this dog, they renamed him Hector, and he went off to be a dog at the nursing homes or whatever, you know, but he definitely was not going to be a detection dog. But yeah, that thing was horrible. And the less said, the better, I think.
I didn't want to be in the spotlight with a football player being involved and everything. I just didn't want to get involved. Maybe I should have. But.
Well, there's not much you could have done, you know, because
one of the getting killed got hit by a car because of somebody's stupidity.
Oh yeah, well then they killed each other at best friends because they didn't know how to contain them, and they'd get together. You know,
rescue the rescue dog from the rescue.
Yeah. Sometimes pit bull advocates are the worst problem we have, you know, with the breed. But I don't know. Are we supposed to be talking about pit bulls so much, or are we supposed to be talking about all breeds?
I mean, pit bulls mostly.
Oh, okay.
I mean, your saying can apply to both. So,
our however,
if I pull a bully type dog that I may not know what it's made of, I am super picky. More picky than I am with other breeds, especially small dogs can get away with a whole lot. If I pull a dog like that, I'm super picky because one, I know how strong it is. And two, after doing this for 15 years, I kind of know what the average pet owner can deal with.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sadly, they can't deal with a whole lot, and we touched on that last night. And I think it goes back to being out of touch with nature and not understanding dogs like people used to. We now think they're here to, you know, fulfill all our emotional needs and, you know, weaknesses, and we just like pour that on them, and it's not fair to the dog. So, but I can't change the world, so I pull dogs that I think can succeed.
Generic owners need generic dogs,
right?
And this is I think this is the overarching problem, is that the no-kill nightmare, as I call it, is that these shelters are so pressured to place dogs because they have no realistic outlet for the animals. And myself as a breeder, when somebody comes here and wants a Cairn Terrier or a Doberman, I sit them down and I tell them, you got to come here first and you got to see what's bad about these dogs, okay? Because I don't want them back. You know, as a breeder, I take them back, and believe me, getting a 14-month-old dog back and then trying to place it again is tough, you know? And I sit them down and I say, well, here's everything bad about a Doberman, and here's everything bad about a Cairn Terrier. And I feel that the shelters are doing just the opposite. They're so pressured to get these dogs out the door. I mean, they go to the extent of these giveaway like candy days where they just like, they call them empty the shelter. Like, come on in. It doesn't matter how inappropriate you are. It doesn't matter how inappropriate the dog is. Take it. Oh, what a wonderful thing we've done. And I'm just sitting there going, you know, because a true dog lover is going to make sure that an appropriate dog gets in an appropriate home. A true dog lover is going to say, this dog is not fit for the general public. And guess what? There's not this magical home in the country available for it. Ergo, it needs to be euthanized. And people like you, the community is having to rely on now to pre-screen these dogs, you know, and the shelter should be doing that. Yeah. But they're under so much pressure, you know, boy, they got that 92% non-euthanasia rate. And so they either stop taking in dogs in need, or they just shovel them out the door to whoever, you know. So good on you guys for pulling dogs. And, you know, like you were saying about being called the pit bull murderer, it's like, you know, hey, at some points I wear that title with pride because I love my breed, and I'm not gonna send dogs out there that are gonna give the breed a black eye.
Everyone
No,
or hurt someone. I mean, the reason I got into testing dogs was when I first got into this, we pulled a yellow lab from a shelter, right? It's a yellow lab. What could it do? And at my house, it was fine, but I also had a pack of dogs there, and it wasn't there very long. And I adopted it out to the wrong home with kids. And I brought it to, I got it back eventually. I convinced them to give it back. And then I brought it to Phyllis, and I'm like, show me what I missed. Because that feeling was such a horrible feeling, knowing that I gave these people that had special needs kids and, all this stuff going on a problem.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to learn what I could do better to avoid that in the future. And sure enough, it took you 30 seconds to get the dog to try to bite you.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Then we tasted inappropriate.
That's so important. That's such an important part of the rescue community. And it's just being completely swept under the rug.
Yeah, and we can actually save more dogs because they can get adopted faster. We don't need to use resources to house dangerous dogs. We don't need to. I haven't actually had to train a dog in our rescue for a very long time. I might need to give them like house training suggestions or, like basic how to walk the dog on a leash type of thing, but I don't have to do any kind of long-term training with the dogs that we pull. So, that frees up a ton of resources right there.
Yeah.
And then we get a good reputation. People come back. I mean, it's a huge like snowball. I wish people could see the larger picture.
Right.
Instead of just focusing on that dog.
Yeah. And and there are things worse than death. People used to say to me all the time, is euthanasia the worst part of your job? Because I had to euthanize 5-10 dogs every day back in the day when I was an animal control officer. And I'd say absolutely not. The thing that tears me up is a bad adoption. When I see a dog going out the door in an absolutely inappropriate home, that's way harder than holding the little thing to my heart while it goes to sleep, and I think that's the thing that discourages me the most is this whole idea that we're going to adopt ourselves out of the problem. It's not going to happen, and I'll go a step further at the shelter I worked at. And of course the bosses didn't know about this, but us in the back did. When people would come in, they always had a couple kids dragging along and they bringing in the litter of puppies or whatever. And we'd say, hey, we're full. These dogs will be euthanized before you even get out of the parking lot. And the people would be like, oh, no, these are really cute puppies. I said, no, listen to what I'm saying. These dogs will be euthanized before you pull out of the parking lot. And we were like, if we didn't make them cry, we hadn't done our job. Okay. But you know what? That impacted them. And it impacted those kids. Yeah. And I feel like today, when you take your litter of puppies in and they say, oh, hon, it's okay. We're no kill. We're going to find wonderful homes for all of them. Whew. What are they? They have absolutely dissolved all responsibility to those people for what they've actually done,
This is true. Let me take him out of the car. You guys go ahead and talk. I'm just gonna.
We'll talk about you.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I am recording though, so be careful.
Okay.
I'll be right back.
Yeah.
All right.
We'll try to behave while you're gone.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah. Is
that the working pit bull I see back there?
What are you looking at?
Oh, I see a book back there. Looks like it could be the white one. Oh, yeah, no, the white one with the big black letters right there.
Your book?
There you go. I was thinking that was the working pit bull. There you go.
There it is.
Big old dread on the front. Whoa, what a dog. He was such a good friend. But he was one, the day he died, I was just like this. whew, like we made it through 10 years without him like killing anything or anybody. He was kind of a spicy dog, I'll tell you.
My girl Tarna was like that.
Yeah. I had some real actually Annetta Cheek's dogs, those red nose Hemp Hill Sorona dogs I had. So I took a Baroness pup named Grip that I had and bred her to a pure Sorona dog, the last Sorona stud they had. And I had her ultrasounded twice because I wanted to make sure I had enough homes lined up. And both times they told me 7 pups. Well, she had 14. And 12 lived. And so anyway, I ended up keeping like 8 of them their whole life, And I have to be honest with you, those were some dog aggressive dogs.
Mm-hmm.
And they were some very game dogs. They were a handful. Great with people,
You have a dog or something?
What's that?
Little Bit. It was a red
Little
dog.
Bit, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? Was that her?
She had a Little Bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're talking 4 decades ago or something.
Yeah, a little bit. She lived with me for a while. She was a great little dog. And I lost my last pit bull a year or two ago. And I'm so disabled now. I have to walk with 2 canes and I'm just all messed up. I've had 4 knee replacements and they can't do any more on my left knee. And so they may have to amputate it. And I'm a mess. So I just don't feel like I can have pit bulls. And it's funny because people are like, but you have Dobermans. And I'm like, oh yeah, but you don't get it.
No.
Totally different. Old Drew, he got out when I had a pet steer. And oh God, I love that cow. Cowie's name is gigantic Jersey steer. And one day old Drew, my last Sorrells pit bull, got out and got him by the nose. And it was raining, it was muddy, it was freezing. I run out there. Oh my, and I live alone, and what I went through trying to get that dog off that cow. And I ended up finally having to shoot my cow because, I wasn't going to shoot Drew for doing what he was doing. He's a bulldog. But I was not able to get him off of that cow. And I remember I was just crying my eyes out and I shot the poor cow. And then the cow's laying there and Drew's got a hold of its mouth. He's got his eyes shut and he's just like, oh, this is the best day of my life. I got to grip a cow. And I was just like, dude, I totally understand. But, that was not good. Pit bull owners always have the most amazing stories,
Yep.
And that's the other thing. Oh my God. Do you ever see those videos where people are getting like killed by dogs and like everybody standing around is just being a complete idiot?
Stand there.
It's like, you guys, all you got to do is choke them out. Please. You can do it in like 10 seconds,
I find most people have the freeze instinct.
Have a what?
The freeze instinct. There's fight, flight, freeze. I mean, I've been at clients' houses where their dogs got into it and they just stood there and watched, and I'm the one that broke it up. Of course, that's why I was there. And
yeah. Well, you're very true because I think we talked about this the other night when in my doing my studies on dog attack. That there's two kinds. There's like the people that freeze and the people that go to town. Very definitely. And if you don't know, but I mean, I don't know. I just get so angry when I see people standing around and they're like, they'll throw a chair at it or something, and I'm like, I'd be so damn mad seeing that dog do that. I'd just go in there and like twist it in a knot,
Oh, and I think that might go back to your animal advocacy groups. They've made people so afraid to take any action against an animal, even when someone's life is at stake.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point.
They may feel like,
I mean, look what just
do it.
You heard about that veterinarian, right? There was a veterinarian that he did something to prevent.
Caught on video.
Oh, you kicked a horse or something like that? Did he get murdered?
No, he committed suicide because so many people said that he was, animal cruelty and this, that.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Further cruelty, and some other guy posted something and he said, look, if life or death, a kick in the nose is going to save your life. It's not going to hurt the horse,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's too bad.
I mean,
you gotta have a thick skin if you're in.
Employees have to be careful about that too, I feel, because they deal with a lot of really dangerous, unknown situations.
Who?
At the shelter.
Yeah.
And I mean, any shelter, not any shelter in particular, but, and there are tactics they need to do and tools they need to use to protect themselves. And I always worry that they'll be concerned about what others will think and not protect themselves appropriately. When really it's hurt the dog.
I used to tell shelter workers that they need a dang stun baton hanging in the kennel, in case something happens, because not everybody is physically adept, to wrestle a dog down or this or that. But yeah, I mean, nothing like dealing with backyard bred dogs you don't know anything about all day long,
Yeah. Yeah, that I'm gonna buy one for the shelter I volunteer at right now.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Yeah, they're great things.
I bought them a lot of safety stuff and like the pig boards, to like put in front of them and stuff like that. But they have had one or two incidents, and it was actually a mostly pit bull that got out and got hold of another dog, and it was really hard for them to get it off.
Yeah,
that would have been very useful. So
yeah, they, it's telling me that, all this trying to pry their jaws open and this and that. It's like all you gotta do is get a rope around their neck and lift up, because if you can't breathe, you can't bite.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. That sounds familiar.
Already looks for that. I know. I say bite, but
so
funny enough.
Let's see if there's anything we haven't covered here.
I had that question about, or maybe it was my question. So in the movie The Good Son, there's with Dredd over the fence.
Fun stuff.
Oh yeah, there's a lot behind that little scene there.
Oh, was that real, or
Yes, that was. Actually, and every word of this is true, and it's going to kill you. But I got to tell you, Elijah Wood, he was in that movie too. Oh, he was gorgeous as a kid too. I mean, he was so sweet. But anyway, a couple of stories about it. First of all, running down the dock.
Yeah.
I was a little nervous because, like I said, Dredd was not keen on kids. He wouldn't go out of his way to be aggressive or anything, but I was like, so anyway, the stunt department decided that they were going to put a harness on him, and then they were going to have a stunt man have a marlin pole with the line on it. And he said, okay, well, I'm going to sit down here with this marlin pole, and then we're going to send at that point, they were using a stunt double for the two boys to run down the dock. And he goes, I got this marlin pole, and if the dog starts getting too close to him, I can slow the dog down with the marlin pole. And I was like, okay. So the dad of the kid that was Elijah Wood's stunt double, he had found a broken off oar, and he just looks at me and goes, nothing personal, but if your dog grabs my kid, I'm gonna whack the shit out of it. And I said, well, nothing personal, but if my dog grabs your kid, go for it. So anyway, we had another person at the far end that had his sleeve, and so we were like, hey, run down there. So the dog had no interest in the kids. He just wanted to go get his sleeve. So everybody's nervous, and they send the kids down the dock, and the guy's got his marlin pole, and Dredd sees his sleeve down there, and he takes off, and that marlin pole just went just instantly broke, right? It was classic. And so me and the dad, we look at each other, and we just start booking down the thing, That was fine. I mean, Dredd had no interest in the kids. He just went down and got his sleeve and all that. But the scene where he's barking on the fence, the dog was too short to reach to be up where his feet needed to be. So they actually had a stunt man kneel down up against the fence, and Dredd was standing on his back. His back feet were on the guy's back. And then they had him tethered under the dock so he couldn't jump up any further than he had to be. But this poor stunt man was standing there with the dog on his back. Well, as most shutzhund trained dogs, I could get him to bark on command, but it didn't look real good, you know. So the Macaulay's standing there, I'm behind him, and I tell Dredd, you know, bark, and so he's going like woof 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 woof, you know, typical prey bark. And now you have to understand, Dredd and I, like, nobody in the entire planet has ever been closer than Dredd and I, and that dog absolutely read me and just could do anything amazing. Like, you couldn't even believe it. So the director says to me, wow, that's not very like aggressive, you know, can you make it more realistic? And I said, yes, I can. And then I took a moment to talk to Macaulay, and I said, you know, this is going to look scary, but it's okay, you know, because like nobody was talking to him or anything. And so anyway, I just put my hand on Macaulay's shoulder, and I looked Dredd deep in the eyes, and I said, kill him. That was when we got that. He meant business. Like he just knew, you know, and he went crazy, you know, on him, and that was how we got that scene. But then afterwards, you know, I have a picture somewhere around him of him down with Macaulay on the dock playing, you know. But yeah, he didn't care for Macaulay, and he did like the other little boy, Elijah Wood, because there was just you know, a vibe there that was kind of nasty. But yeah, those were the good old days. The movie work was definitely fun.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
Yeah, he could do some amazing stuff.
And didn't he have the most over any breed of dog at one point?
Well, yeah, what he had was, he wasn't like the highest title. He didn't have the highest degrees. Like, I never got a UD on him. But what I was claiming was that he had, at that time, he had the most different kinds of titles, because this was before the day of nowadays, you know, you get a title for kicking your dog off a dock, you know. I mean, there's everything, agility, and, you know, oh my God, the AKC has the farm dog title, where the dog like has to jump up on a hay bale and walk past a cage full of animals. You know, oh my God, I'm sorry, but I'm from the days when there was like CD, CDX, UD, you know, and so he had duck herding titles, he had sheep herding titles, he had weight pull titles, you know, he had tracking titles, he had schutzhund, you know, he had a watchdog title, he had, you know, all, you know, he was a champion in UKC, so he had a pretty wide variety of things at that time. And a lot of what I did with Dredd was very unashamedly PR. You know, because that was the late 80s, and it was a nightmare. I mean, the whole herding thing came up because some idiot lady with a border collie in my hometown was trying to get pit bulls banned. And I lived on a farm, and Dredd helped me with gathering up the birds and sheep and stuff. And so I went to a herding trainer and said, hey, just show me what I need to do to enter a trial. And we did. And, you know, he went out there and was earning, you know, he was beating the Aussies and stuff. You know, it was hilarious. But that was all just PR, because the breed needed it so badly then.
Yeah, it all says a lot about the relationship. What was that question we had for her, Julie, where we asked about the trainer versus the temperament of the dog? You remember
how young trainers may not see sound dogs anymore?
Oh, there's that, but there was
that's not it.
Her with
the importance of temperament and soundness in power breeds?
No, that's not it either. We had great questions for you, Diane.
I mean, I think we've touched on a lot of them, which is why I'm not really asking them. I mean, you know, usually this stuff just comes up in conversation too.
relationship.
I do like your question about young, what young trainers are seeing,
Yeah.
because that does get back to you only know what you know.
Yeah.
And not only are they not seeing sound dogs, they're being told unsound dogs are just fine. And
Right.
that's where people like you folks are going to be doing a huge service to educate them that, hey, it's okay. And that's why, I've been toying with the idea of doing a channel, because I just want to get up there and say, you guys, common sense. Okay. Like, I'll have my Doberman owners call me up and they'll be like, oh, like the dog chased me off the couch, and I didn't know what to do. And I'm like, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. Okay. Like, what are you talking about? The dog chased you off the couch and you didn't do anything. Like, okay, if that was your kid, what would you have done? you know? And I'm like, whack him.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm old school. It's like, I am the biggest cookie trainer of all time. I am the proudest thing that I ever did in my dog training life was taking my first Sorrel's, pit bred dog, male, and I trained him through Schutzhund 3 and French Ring Brevet. And I swear to God, I was so locked into doing it in pure positive that, like, he never got a correction. You never wore a choke chain. It was pure positive, because I was under the instruction of a Marine World SEAL trainer at the time. And that was awesome. I mean, I learned so much from that. It was like unbelievable, because, I grew up with the jerk, click and trick, kick method. And so that was just an amazing thing. But, trainers today, they're so afraid to do common sense things, or like you're saying, just to be common sense about this temperament doesn't belong in a pet home. I don't know. How are we going to fix that, girls?
And
Love to,
I don't
or
know.
everything in 2 or 3 weeks.
Phyllis and I are working on a temperament eval video project.
Oh, good.
But I do think, this is again where all this mm, I'm all for positive training. I rehab, and I consider it rehab because I'm taking them back to their original state, right?
Okay.
Not making a dog that has genetic issues seem okay.
Right.
So I'm very careful about how I use that word because it gets misconstrued. I'm with you on that. But
Yeah.
and I do a ton through not only food, but belonging to a social pack, getting affection, getting praise, getting rewards, like they get to get out and be a dog and all this stuff, right? It does wonders. But at the end of the day, I feel like they're dogs, and dogs tell each other no.
Yes, they do.
And they do it so well. I think humans have lost the ability to tell each other no in a fair way.
Yeah.
And a lot of people only have experienced no in an abusive way.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to relearn as a society how to communicate a fair boundary effectively. And honestly, I learned it through dogs, and then I could apply it to people in my life better.
Yes.
By watching dogs and how just the right amount of, and they release it at just the right time. So it's very clear
Yeah.
what they want, what they don't want. I had a good pack that helped me rehab dogs, and I've watched Phyllis's dogs, and I think
it's all about appropriate aggression,
yeah,
or appropriate discipline. Yeah. And also, don't you feel that dogs stay out of a lot of trouble by having a strong hierarchy? They know where they are. I mean, I have, oh my God, how many dogs do I have? I don't know how many dogs I have, but I have a lot of dogs. Okay. Let's say just in my fifth wheel, I've got, the Boston, the Black and Tan Coonhound, and probably, 6 or 7 Cairns, and then I've got a Doberman I got back running around, and everybody knows who can step over who, you know, I'm the bottom of the pack. They all step on my hair at night. It makes me crazy. But, you know, that's something in America as a democracy also we're afraid to address, is that dogs show us that people and dogs are happiest when they know their place, you know, or they know who's the boss. And my Dobermans are especially like that. Boy, if they don't, you'd almost go so far as to say that they don't mind getting in trouble because it triggers something in them to where like, okay, I know where I stand and this is good, you know? So I think it's so, you guys have your work cut out for you to educate the public that it's okay to apply pressure to dogs in certain circumstances and this and that, you know. I don't know. It's tough. I hope you have thick skins. It's, you know, it sounds like you do because, you know, like poor old Sue Sternberg. I was not a Sue Sternberg fan. I went to one of her things and I thought, I thought she was kind of goofy, but I admired her because by God, she took a stand and was like, you know, we need to euthanize inappropriate dogs and we need to stress dogs to see, you know, this and that. I mean, you know, everybody made fun of her, but she was real. She was doing what really needed to be said, you know.
Yeah, she gets a lot of crap for it, for sure.
Oh yeah. You know, yeah. I mean, I hope you guys, you know, just remember, you know, my favorite saying is I'm proud of the people who don't like me. You know, because seriously, like the people who don't like me, you know, or believe the worst about they hear this or that, you know, they're idiots, you know, for the most part. So I hope you guys going forward with this program can understand that if someone can't see that you're trying very hard to help, and, you know, yeah, they may not believe, you know, every single thing you say, but who does, you know?
Yeah.
You know, you guys are trying to educate people and you're trying to help dogs and help people. And, you know, who can really say that's a bad thing, you know?
Yeah.
Unless, of course, you're Cesar Milan and you're like making it a whole entire big mess. Then there's the problem, okay?
Well, I am a true believer that change will not come by people who don't challenge things or have new ideas. I mean, it's just impossible if you go along with the status quo. You're not going to change anything, which may be fine with you. I'm not saying everyone needs to change stuff, but you know, I feel like I've had a very specific kind of exposure to certain things. I mean, starting with Phyllis and then other trainers, and you know, I've been very lucky to see the dogs here. And like you were saying, you know, genetics is strong, both positive and negative. So these dogs have great genetics. They go through hell and they're still great dogs.
Yep.
Versus, you know, the puppy who's bought and raised in a very loving home its whole life and it still bites people, right? So
Yep.
it can work many ways. And, you know, I feel like I need to give it a try. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Every little bit helps, you know.
If it doesn't catch on, I'll go to my grave knowing I tried.
Right. Yeah. Just don't let them get you down, you know, with the whole, you know, this whole, I mean, because to me, when I look at people who are like the whole no-kill thing where they're like, oh, you know, it's better for the dog to go to a sanctuary, which is basically, you know, like a cage or a crate in someone's garage or whatever, you know, and I'm like, realistically, would you want that for your own dog? You know, is that really what you would want for your own dog? You know, no. I mean, my best friends, they all know, you know, when I croak, you know, I'm not micromanaging them. They know how I feel about it, and they would not put any of my dogs in rescue. You know, I have a list of people that'll take my dogs in that, and some of them will be better suited being euthanized, you know.
So back to this sound, can you describe a sound temperament? Because I do think it's hard. I have lots of examples here. I think. But I do think, especially as trainers, you're not called for the dogs that have sound temperament because they're not problems.
Mm-hmm.
But what does that look like specifically maybe in pit bulls?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because pit bulls to me are absolutely in a class by themselves when it comes to temperament. In other words, there's things that I would put up with in a shepherd that I absolutely would not put up with in a pit bull, because there's such a different mindset between defense, prey, confident and unconfident. So to take pit bulls first, I think the number one thing is they have to be innately comfortable with people. And I'm sure you guys have seen this when I don't have kids. I've never had kids, and a lot of my friends don't have kids. And so my dogs never grew up around children. But when I was raising pit bulls, it was so interesting, because when they could be like, say, 6, 7 months old when they first met a small child, and they would innately go into the soft, gooey behavior with the kids. In a couple of cases, they didn't. They became stiff, they became rigid, and or even aggressive. And in that case, they were out of the breeding program, period. End of story. So I think with what I look for in any pit bull is an absolute soft, gooey attitude with people, no fear. They can be submissive. They can even be a little timid, not fearful, but just very submissive to people and like that. But I think one of the things that distresses me the most is when people lump pit bulls in with dominant breeds. You know, they'll be like, oh, Rottweilers, Dobermans, and pit bulls. Well, I've had Rottweilers, Dobermans, pit bulls, and absolutely there could not be a bigger division in temperament than a pit bull from a European guarding breed. Absolutely could not be a bigger difference. So any reactivity or human aggression, I don't want to see in a pit bull. Now, when you talk about like my Dobermans, I'm lucky. I have a line of Dobermans that they're very people appropriate. They don't. I can open the gate and let a bunch of them out to meet strangers with kids, no problems. You know, things like that. But they're still, decent guard dogs. But as far as just your basic dog in the shelter, I think the number one thing that I don't like is for instance, here's my little temperament test. Like, it's so little. I walk up to the door and I make more or less hard eye contact with the dog, and then I just make a very quick move like that. Maybe away from it, maybe towards it, maybe flick its nose, just the littlest thing like that. And you'd be surprised how many dogs flare up. Okay. Mm-hmm. They're like, and people are like, well, that's not fair. You flicked its nose, or you this, that. Oh, because no 2-year-old's ever going to flick its nose ever,
Get scared and jerk away.
Yeah. Because in a dog pound, you're looking at generic dogs for generic people. You and I, all of us here on this call, we could handle a dog with an unsound temperament. Okay. But that's not what the shelter should be putting out in the public. And that's not what the public wants, So if a dog is quick to flare up and reactive like that, I'm not happy about that. And I think that's the number one thing is you have two kinds of shelter workers. You have the excuse makers, and you have the Marine sergeants who are looking to pull out the people who aren't going to make it. And that's me. I'm a Marine sergeant. I want to know that dog is sound when I put it out in the public.
Can you explain a little bit the difference between fear and submission? I think that gets confused a lot.
Oh, sure. Oh my God. Have you guys seen that little brown chihuahua on Facebook that the guy with the tattoos loves on and kisses it?
Oh, and he
and
goes,
all that.
Yeah, yeah.
No. The dog
No.
is like so submissive, and they play like love song in the background, and the dog just loves him, And submissive is absolutely not the same thing as fearful, because when the dog rolls over on its back, it like in these little chihuahuas case, it's just trying to get the guy to pet it, pay attention to it or whatever. Now, is there an element of fear? Only in the sense that the dog says to the person or other dog, you are dominant to me. I'm not going to mess with you. But it's not fear like, oh my God, are you going to hurt me? That's the big difference. There's no question of, are you going to hurt me? Do I need to react? There's just, God, I love you. Give me a hug. That's the big difference, And where like, I think of like little female pit bulls where they just turn inside out. They're so happy to see you and they're all wiggly waggly, that's not fear. That's just being a submissive dog. Now the dog in the corner giving you the side eye and, it's terrified. First of all, I feel very strongly that living your life in a constant state of stress and fear is not a gift. Okay. I felt very strongly that way about many of the Vic dogs that went on to live out their lives, cowering under a bench their whole entire life. That's no way to live. And I just don't think those dogs should be placed. Do they do okay in a home situation? Yeah, if they don't get taken out, and if they can just stay in their little shell of their home, they're fine. But God, there's so many nice dogs out there that can be better for the people and interactive, and so I don't know. Life's short. You can only have so many dogs, and people are like, oh, well, that's horrible. You're discounting the dog's life. And it's like, well, yeah, I guess I am, because life's tough, things live, things die. And if a dog is going to be a menace to the society or a menace to a kid or a menace to itself, or isn't going to be able to live a full, normal dog life, I guess I'm free. I just don't have a thing about death. I mean, death's not that bad, I'd rather, it's like these dogs in carts and stuff. And what people don't realize when they see the whole cart dog thing is that, okay, that's really cute to get your views on Facebook or TikTok, but those dogs that are paralyzed, when they're not in that cart for an hour a day or whatever, they're just laying there in their own pee and poo and, getting bed sores. And it's just, they see other dogs running and playing and they can't. So I'm pretty bitter about that whole thing. To me, if a dog can't live its life, because that's how I feel, when I get to the point where they've whittled me down to the point where I can't take care of myself and live alone, I'll take care of business. I'll shut up shop, because that's who I am. And I guess I think dogs are like that too, because they live so much in the moment. Anyway.
Well, they can't even comprehend death, really, but
yeah.
And here in New Mexico, it's a little different because we do have such an overpopulation. So there's no scarcity of dogs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think the whole system is a little more realistic. My concern is that the people here making the decisions are so uneducated, they're picking the wrong dogs to euthanize. Or, they get attached to one dog for some reason or whatever. Yeah. It's a very random decision versus going through and doing temperament evals and making an educated decision. I mean, unfortunately, the decision has to be made here. There's no there's no way around it until the state gets its act together and starts controlling people's actions. But so
I saw that as a real problem when I was traveling around to shelters, and they would always have me come in and evaluate the dogs in the shelter. And there was always that one shelter worker who had befriended some like real piece of crap dog, and they're like, oh, but it's so sweet, because it likes them and, and all that. And they want to make excuses for it. And, that's a real thing. Shelter workers, they do tend to fall in love with the problem boys, and they do need to be educated, and it annoys me that there's not more education. There is a National Animal Control Association, and I haven't been involved in animal control in quite a while, and I know they were kind of trying, but it is ghastly how little training animal control officers or shelter workers get. And there'll never be anything that everyone agrees on. I mean, can you imagine trying to come up with something like that? But there really should be some basic safety training, and I hate to say it, but there should be some basic soundness, physical soundness training. Oh my God, you see these dogs that come in that are like just completely dysplastic or this or that, and they just need to be humanely euthanized, and they're not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But well, I'm gonna let you go because it's been 2 hours. And
oh my gosh, has it?
It has.
Oh, you guys are still sleeping in there. Good Lord.
I think we could both talk to you for a long, long time. Maybe we'll have to go to Washington.
Yeah, come on up. Heck yeah. I should come down there. I love the sun and I hate the cold. And
oh yeah, you're welcome whenever. You just let me know, and we can go, I don't know, do some fun dog stuff. But
yeah, that would be fun. That would be. All right, well, just keep me in the loop on when it's going to be available. I'll get my friends to
I will
sign in, and they'll to laugh at me.
I'll text you the link, and I so appreciate you coming on. I think the information you've amassed is super valuable, and I want to try and get it out there because I don't think we hear this kind of stuff enough in the dog world. So
well, thank you both of you again for what you're doing, because you're the guys getting it out there, and I really, really do appreciate that.
Yeah. And may I reserve the right to ask you to do this again?
Absolutely. You know me, there's no shortage of words coming out of this mouth.
Makes for a great interview.
Okay. Yeah, it was great meeting you, Phyllis.
Great meeting you too.
Thank you so much for joining me, Julie Hart, for this podcast. I hope you found it inspirational and educational and might cause you to look a little deeper into that canine companion sitting next to you today. I really enjoyed getting to know Diane Jessup better. If anyone is interested in finding out more about Diane, you can go to her website, danbarranch.com. And again, her books are also for sale on eBay and other used book options. I believe they are out of print currently, but they're still readily available. If anyone is a pit bull fan, The Working Pit Bull is a great book, and it's in full color. Diane, thank you so much for taking time to talk to Phyllis and I today. We really, really enjoyed it, and I have a feeling we might be talking to you again. If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit like or subscribe or follow to be notified of our next episode. Find out more about my online and in-person dog training options. Please go to my website, hearttoheartcanine.com, and go to store to see my workshops. And for online learning, click on the online learning tab. I have tons of online learning about no-centric methods, fearful dogs, feral dogs, and reactivity. Please keep in mind, this podcast is not made for individual dog training information. We do not know your dog. We do not know you. And so this podcast is made merely for entertainment and educational purposes. Please contact a professional trainer or one of my guests or me if you have a dog training concern. Dogs can be inherently dangerous, and it's good to exercise common sense and caution when dealing with dogs. Your continued support is very much appreciated. I really treasure all the good feedback and personal messages I've gotten about my guests on this podcast. Hope you all have a great day.